I've been spending a lot of time recently talking about how much I'm enjoying the War Within Alpha, and that is true. It is good. I am having fun. But there's one thing that I am really upset about recently, and now is the perfect time to talk about it. Let's talk about Earthen Dwarves. Hi, it's Llarold, and I'm going to talk about the new allied race in the War Within, but first don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, let's start with the basics about Earthen Dwarves. They are available to both the Horde and Alliance. They will be unlocked by doing the campaign, and they are an allied race. They're, pretty cool looking. They're standard dwarves. I mean, look at me. I'm 4'2" or whatever. You can see I barely measure up to this box here. And they are made of stone. They have a bunch of gems inlaid in their bodies. If I log out here and go to the character creator, you can kind of see that the art team learned a lot from making evokers, in that if we go over to the second tab here, you're able to customize the gem colors. You can change what your different shoulders look like independent of each other. There's a lot of control over the way that they look, and I would say generally speaking, I do think they look really good. There's also a lot of control over beards. One of the beards here has like a cool S on it. I had this looking earlier. Maybe it's a facial look. Also, and this is like a nice little nod to Tolkien and like people who kind of are really into their fantasy. Women also bearded. So, that's kind of fun. I swear, there it is. Boom. Cool S on some of these beards. Yeah, very fun, right? I like the way they look. Big fan of the aesthetics and the amount of customization that you're able to have over them. And they're able to play pretty much the full range of classes. You're not able to play a druid. That's maybe kind of the one outlier that would be like kind of cool, but no dwarven druids, at least as of yet. But you wouldn't expect to play an evoker or a demon hunter. And I guess in the story of the game, Death Knights, the first round of Death Knights were whatever, all the normal mortal races, and then the second round of Death Knights were all of the allied races, every race in the game. And we just stumbled on these guys. They haven't had a chance to be turned into Death Knights yet, so I think it makes sense that these races or this race is not available to play these classes. And other than that, the full range of classes is pretty wide. But now we have to get to the bad part, the disappointing part. We have to talk about the racial bonuses. But first, let's just give a quick history of racial bonuses impacting PvE and WoW. Obviously, they played a huge role in PvP at times, with like undead and humans being insanely overpowered over the years. But in PvE, there's basically only been 4 that have really made a huge impact. Trolls used to get 5% more damage against beasts, so they were completely dominant in any sort of beast boss raid. Like Thok in Siege of Orgrimmar was really kind of the breaking point for that. He was ultimately what got that bonus finally nerfed after, like 8 or 9 years of dominance. Humans' 10% reputation bonus was also hugely impactful for the last 19 years, and that is finally being removed in the War Within now that reputations are going to be account-wide. So good changes there to both of those overpowered racials. I think it's for the best. The other 2 racial bonuses that have had a serious impact and continue to do so even into Dragonflight are Arcane Torrent, the Blood Elf AoE Dispel, and Stoneform, the Dwarven debuff removal cooldown. Arcane Torrent is mostly used in Mythic Plus, but it does sometimes come up in raids, such as on Razageth Phases 1 and 2, when you needed it to help clear out her sparks. It was really, really valuable. Basically, everyone who was playing a warrior on that fight, at least in like the world top 20, switched to a Blood Elf, except for me. And then Stoneform and the Dark Iron Dwarf version of it, Fireblood, are massively powerful racial bonuses as well that are, I think, generally a lot more valuable in raids than Arcane Torrent. They completely changed the difficulty of a lot of encounters. They allow players to clear like super deadly debuffs like Ferox Dispel and the bleed from the dragons and Broodkeeper Diurna. Basically, anytime there's a bleed mechanic, anytime there's some sort of dispel mechanic, Stoneform completely trivializes that. I was one of maybe 2 protection warriors in the world top 20 to kill Broodkeeper Diurna without switching to Dwarf, and I was only able to do that for 2 reasons. Reason number 1, I am a stubborn old man and I refuse to play Alliance under any circumstances. I did that for a number of years in the first 5-6 years of this game existing, and I'm not going back. Same with healing, I'm never going back. And then reason number 2, we had an evoker who could cauterize the bleed on a 1-minute cooldown. It did make the fight substantially harder. There's no way around it. I definitely wasted some pulls by not just being a dwarf, but no regrets, really. For Farak, the Dispel on that fight was an extremely painful pressure point for virtually every raid early on in progression, and the solution was once again to fill the raid with as many dwarves as you possibly could. I went the other direction, I just healed through it as a blood elf, like just straight up. I saw the option to work smarter, and I deliberately chose to work harder instead. So with that being said, when Blizzard announced that Earthen Dwarves were going to be available to Alliance and Horde, I was thrilled. I was over the moon. I like dwarves. I've always wanted to play a dwarf, but be Horde with those amazing dwarven racial bonuses, be like shorter than this box here. That's great. That makes me very happy. All my friends play Horde. My channel manager plays Horde. I have played Horde exclusively for the last 11 years or so. And, I like the Horde. I like what I like. Stoneform is the racial so nice they made it twice. It was so good for dwarves that they made it the same thing again for Dark Iron dwarves. It's a huge part of raid design and competitive balance at the high end of playing the game, and finally it's coming to the Horde, or so I thought. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, and now we should really take a look at these what are these guys? Earthen Dwarf racials here. So the first power that you get is Azurite Surge. It is a 2-minute cooldown, and it is an Empower spell. The rank 1 deals a lot of AoE damage as fire. The rank 2 heals allies for a medium amount. Really, it's not a ton of damage. It's 26,000 damage in sort of a starter level 70 character. So not a huge amount really of AoE damage, but on the relative scale of racials, it's a decent amount. And then the rank 3 is a very small additional bit of damage to the highest health enemy in that set, so really not a lot. And if we just charge this up here, you can see how long it takes to charge up to rank 3. 1, 2, 3, pop. Yeah, not a massive amount of damage. There's no sound in for it yet. There's not really much of an animation to it yet. They have talked about wanting to add Empower spells to classes other than Evoker. I kind of think it doesn't really land here for the Earthen Dwarves. I think it's, obviously the visual and the lack of sound, those are very much placeholder. It is the alpha after all. But it's over 2 seconds of time spent channeling this thing up to do, and we can look at the combat log, a bit of AoE damage, and then a very small amount of single target damage, and also a bit of healing. It does heal you as well, so that's good. I mean, that's like maybe the main redeeming thing I can say is that if you just do a quick snap in AoE with it, I don't think it's horrible. I think that the rank 3 being the longest amount of charge up to get the smallest amount of added damage kind of doesn't make sense. That probably should be, those numbers should probably be flipped around. A small amount of AoE damage and then a big burst of single target damage. Those probably should be flipped around, but that is where it is right now in the alpha. Now, number 2, Titan Wrought Frame. You get 10% increased base armor from your equipped items. I've compared a bunch of paladins. This basically winds up being a little bit over 2% damage reduction from physical sources for a prot paladin. So I think it's probably about 2% physical damage reduction, which honestly isn't that bad. I have made up a spreadsheet that I'll look at here once I've finished going through these. The third bonus is hyper productive. You get a bit of finesse. This just makes it so that you get a little bit of extra stuff when you're gathering. Really not a huge deal. Ingest minerals. This is not in the game yet, but you're always well fed and you can't consume food. Instead, you eat a gem to change the bonus that you're getting. Now, what's interesting here is you'll notice that there's stamina, haste, mastery, crit, and verse. Interesting concept. I love the idea of being permanently well fed. I love the alchemical flavor packet in Dragonflight, having food that persists through dying, have food that basically works like a flask. Great quality of life. The problem here, as you'll note, is there isn't a primary stat option, which means that this is actually a throughput loss. You're not able to eat feasts. You're not able to eat eggs or whatever the primary stat food is for single players, which means that you're actually losing out on stat budget, unless they decide to not have feasts or they decide to make everything go back to just have secondary stats as your food option. This is actually a pretty significant drop in power for dwarves unless they do something to boost this bonus. And if they do that, then this basically would step on Pandaren toes by, if they made it so that you get double impact on the food, then that would basically just make them have Pandaren racial, but then also this kind of weird Azurite surge on top of it. So I like the idea, but there's sort of like something missing here. Like the fact that you can't get primary stat is not great. I mean, it does basically just mean that by choosing this race, you've made yourself weaker than everybody who can eat a feast. And then you have Wide-Eyed Wonder, which is just like, I like this thematically. You get double XP for exploring areas. Like, this is who cares, right? But I do like the idea of like them being, you know, explorers. Like that I think is very fun and cute. So I did, like I said, make up a little spreadsheet here, and these are all just based off of numbers of like level 70 pre-made characters, basically like warriors or paladins, nothing special at all. I kind of ranked out some of these. I wouldn't like put too much emphasis on any of this. Now, notably, none of these DPS numbers are high, right? Like if you're hitting your racial on cooldown in a level 70 pre-made character with admittedly terrible gear like quest greens, you're only getting like 300 DPS out of Azerite Surge. Now this is actually a little bit misleading because of the long cast on Azerite Surge, as you can see. All right, pretty slow cast with no animation and no sound. But like Lightforged Draenei, I think is probably the closest competitor, and I'll log over to that. And Lightforged Draenei, I think, has a much more interesting racial skill where they just press a button, and then after a 3-second delay, they do an AoE that deals a pretty substantial amount of damage, about 40,000 damage. It is on a very weird cooldown, though, 2.5 minutes. As opposed to the 2-minute cooldown, but like we'll show that off. Let's see where I can find some targets to AoE. I think these are actually spread out enough that this doesn't hit all of them, but we're gonna try it anyway. As you can see, yeah, I think it literally only hit the one. Oh, it hit 2. Right. So bit of a spread out situation going there. Of course, you know, they do get some other like thematic stuff. Like I really like, it's very funny, the Forge of Light. Yeah, I mean, not a lot of stuff going on with the Lightforged Draenei, really, but like just being able to summon a golden blacksmithing anvil's funny. Also, it calls it a forge, but it's clearly an anvil. You know, there's a lot of racial bonuses that are really not very good. Nightborn was another one that I played around with. I just wanted to see, like, is this the worst racial ever? And I don't think it is. I think that one's a little further down the line, but it sure is bad. All right, here we go. I'm gonna jump onto this. I'm gonna jump onto these training dummies with this Nightborn racial. All right, here we go. Look at how good it looks. Wow. Yeah, I mean, arguably the worst racial ever. I think the only thing that really is like on that same level would be the Goblin racial. Their Rocket Barrage, which is on a shared cooldown with Rocket Jump. It does very, very, very little damage. It does like 70 DPS or so. It's like 6,000 damage on a 90-second cooldown. Here we go. Check it out. Wow. Great. Yeah, it's the worst one. Ultimately, I think in terms of damage, the tuning on the Azerite Surge is actually not that bad. The real issue here is that it is this Empower spell. The healing is cool, but like, it's just not that amazing, especially considering that it has the clumsiness. It really doesn't really do enough. And then maybe more egregious is the fact that this is a dwarf race, right? Not only is it a dwarf race, it is literally a dwarf race made out of stone. They are made of stone. And for some reason, they don't have stone form. They don't have fire blood. They don't have that sort of defining dwarf racial where they're able to remove all debuffs on them, get either like a stat buff if they're playing Dark Iron Dwarf, or just a straight physical damage reduction buff if they're playing regular dwarf. And that's a problem. Like, that is just a straight weakness. Like, check it out. Yeah, look, I mean, I love Dark Iron Dwarves. I know that like general consensus is that regular dwarves are a little stronger for kind of 2 reasons. One, they get the crit damage bonus out of Might of the Mountain, which is actually just better for overall damage output, but then also Stoneform giving damage reduction as part of a damage reduction cooldown makes a little more sense than what is it called? Fire Blood, giving like primary stat as part of an alleged damage reduction cooldown. Like, it makes more sense, right? The whole construction of regular dwarf is a little bit more coherent than Dark Iron Dwarves, but Dark Iron Dwarves have some cool stuff. 1% physical damage reduction, which that's about half of 2% physical damage reduction, so I guess that's technically worse than the Earthen Titan Rot frame. But then there's some other cool stuff, like I really like Dungeon Delver, the 4% faster move speed while indoors. The Mole Machine is also super awesome, the 30-minute pseudo hearth that you can kind of use to go to lots of places around the world. Like right now, I think I'm only able to literally go to like Ironforge, Stormwind, and Shadowforge, but you can go to a lot of places. I think a lot of my issue, I think a lot of why I'm upset is that I'm specifically comparing them to dwarves. Like if I were to compare them to this guy right here, this big Kultiran, like first of all, let's just stop and enjoy how enormous Kultiran are. I mean, it rules, right? It's great that they're so large. I tower over this tiny dwarf. Best to even stand uphill a little bit. Yeah. Gargantuan, just a very large man, which is like satisfying to me. I like just being a very huge guy. And I think if that were the basis of comparison between the Earthen Dwarves and everything else, if they were something other than dwarves, I think that would make it a lot easier to accept that they don't have stone form, they don't have that incredible game-defining racial power that dwarves have been using to basically dominate raids for a lot of years now. I think I could swallow that a lot easier. You know, this is a great big guy. If I were to log on to an earthen man, you know, earthen person instead of an earthen dwarf, I think it would maybe be just like less of a bitter pill. But they are dwarves, so it's pretty hard to reckon with the idea that every other race of dwarf, the ones that are available to the Alliance, get this incredible, like, massive defensive cooldown, and Earthen Dwarves get... Hold on, here we go. Pew. Yeah. Tough. I think why this is upsetting to me is that Blizzard has created a game with a lot of really good looking races and artwork. Like, I named this guy Boring Dwarf, but look at him. He's anything but. He looks great. There's a lot of good looking stuff available in this game, and racial bonuses pigeonhole players into playing races and factions that they don't want to because of the competitive nature of the game. There's also the issue of encounter design that punishes every player who doesn't yield to playing the Alliance Dwarven Master race, and I think encounter design is the true villain in this situation. Because of racial bonuses as they currently exist, Earthen Dwarves are probably going to be dead on arrival in the competitive aspects of the game. Unless that racial bonus, that Azerite Surge, gets a massive power increase, I don't think it's going to be a factor. This is a shame because I really do think the race looks good, and I like the idea of their food bonus a lot if it were tuned to be balanced. I think it's interesting that as the blend of NPCs you interact with throughout the game's story become more diverse, you know, Alliance and Horde NPCs interacting with you. You get a quest from a Lightforged Draenei, then you walk over to talk to a Nightborn, then you're hanging out with a Blood Elf, and, you know, just all over the place. As that is happening, Alliance and Horde players have their racial choices more constrained due to the suffocating nature of racial bonuses. And as things stand, that probably isn't going to change. My proposed solution, the thing I've been saying Blizzard should do since Troll was overpowered in Siege of Orgrimmar, is to just remove the throughput bonuses from racials entirely. Things like Stone Form, Might of the Mountain, these should probably go. Little bonuses like Frost Resistance or the 10% armor that the dwarves, the Earthen Dwarves get, or the 1% physical damage reduction that Dark Iron Dwarves get, the fall damage reduction that pandas get, the extra fish and meat that High Mountain Tauren get, Nightborn's cantrips, their ability to summon a mailbox every 10 minutes. These are all great. These are the kind of things that racial bonuses should be instead of straight throughput increases or just major defensive cooldowns. Racial bonuses should not be powers that fundamentally alter the way that raid groups handle the final bosses of mythic raids, but they are. I would love to have a solution to this problem. Blizzard says they value your feedback, and you can certainly give it. You can write a polite, angry letter to them to let you know how much you dislike this current state of affairs. I've done that. Thousands of players have been doing that for over a decade now, and Nothing has changed, so I have my doubts that this feedback will get things done finally, but I'm still giving it. And what else really can you do? I feel like there's only two options. You can play the overpowered race, you can be a boring dwarf, or you can play what looks good to you and be slightly weaker. I choose to do the latter, and I do think I'm happier that way. Just to give a reality check here and not like go out on a horrible downer ending, it's not like these racials are game breaking for the majority of players. I mean, even doing a top 20 kill as not a dwarf, I made it work. It didn't actually prevent us from being able to do it. It was just a little harder. Night Elves are the second most popular race in the game, and their racials are extremely mediocre. This doesn't ruin the game, but it is a problem, and the problem has been identified and solutions have been proposed for like 12 years now, and nothing has changed, and that is kind of disappointing. So for what it's worth, I do really like the way that the Earthen Dwarves look. I will play one at some point, even if the racials are exactly the same as they are now. And there is still time for Blizzard to make changes to their racial bonuses, and even if they don't, the armor bonus is mathematically pretty good, so it's not like this race is terrible. It's not Nightborn. But also, again, we're in the alpha. Like, check it out. I'm gonna talk and just say chat real quick because I am on this Horde Earthen Dwarf here. Hello. You cannot speak that language, right? So, it's still very much a work in progress. But it is disappointing. I thought we were gonna get Horde Stone Form. It turns out that Horde Stone Form is about 2% physical damage reduction. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.